Since for Aristotle, only a composite of body and soul constitutes the ontological reality of man, and that the two can never be separated, it would seem the Christian belief in a body's resurrection might confirm his view, but not so. As we have seen, for Aristotle, there was nothing eternal about body or soul. When the flame, soul, has burnt up the candle, when there is nothing left to burn, the flame goes out. For Plato, of course, and more especially for the Stoics, this was an eternal flame, one that had no beginning and no end. Marginalia, an eternal flame eternally consumes. Back to the text. The problem this created for the scholastics, however, was not Aristotle's view that body and soul were not eternal or could never be separated. After all, he was not a Christian. The problem was their view of human nature as a person. Remember, person was a property of nature, which, according to Aristotle, cannot constitute any ontological reality because it is not a substance. But if body and soul are separated at death, which Aristotle never believed, what becomes of the person? Aquinas held that since the soul alone did not constitute a complete human being or person, then after death there could be no persons in heaven. Only when the soul's form or body was restored, resurrected, would someone be a complete person. The only persons presently in heaven with a resurrected physical body are Jesus and his mother, and until the resurrection, no other person is in heaven, because human nature is not complete without a physical body. Where Paul and the fathers regarded Jesus' resurrected body as a spiritual body, according to Aquinas, this is false. Until the resurrection, the souls in heaven are not all there. This means that the souls presently in heaven are totally personless, subjectless, selfless, no I am or self-identity whatsoever, actually the truth of things. So there is no use praying to St. John, Peter, or any saintly person because he is not there yet, nor is Aquinas himself. Only when everyone is resurrected can anyone in heaven be identified as a person. This is the conclusion one gets when making person the ontological reality of man instead of human nature. No real human beings in heaven yet. This has to be the last straw on Aquinas' theology. Aquinas' obvious implication is that heaven can only be on some physical planet, one big enough for trillions and trillions of material bodies. God help us. But this is what we get when person is taken to be man's ontological reality. But if the soul already in heaven is eternally enjoying the beatific vision, which is the Christian Orthodox belief, then what could a material body add to this? Why would a body be necessary when the physical senses cannot see God anyway? In this matter, Aristotle said something interesting. Material substances, he said, not only had the potential for actuality, but the potential to change, to be in a more completed state. So what might this more completed or final state be? Apart from God, nothing begins without an end, so who knows the end God has destined for matter? As to its final state, Aristotle held the true nature of matter was unknowable. The same view as those who hold the essence of God is unknowable. And who knows the eternal connection of these two unknowables? The divine Logos, of course, immediately comes to mind. For the Stoics, at least, the Logos and matter were never disconnected in the first place. No doubt this is why the fathers regarded the incarnation as the union of man's body or flesh with the divine Logos. Although all the philosophers regarded some original form of prime matter as eternal, yet Aristotle agreed with Plato that material substances were not real or actual being. For Aristotle, real or actual being was active movement, life in other words. So where for Plato, ontological reality was the underlying essence or nature of material things, for Aristotle, ontological reality did not underlie anything, but was the individual unit or unity of matter and form. Where Plato held forms or universals were independent of the material objects that imperfectly manifested them, Aristotle held neither material objects nor immaterial forms were independent, but together formed the unity of real being. Sensible objects, he says, are the first realities, as apprehended by the senses, and only after that, via the intellect, can man know the essences, forms, or ideas of the secondary realities, such as a soul. Marginalia is the reason why Aristotle's contemplative faculty probably belongs to God in man, because contemplative knowing is a sharing of essences or participating, and, quote, like knows unto like, end quote. While Plato did not deny material reality, yet the essence of something is not what appears to exist. Rather, it was the essence, or what does not appear, that had real existence. Matter was always in flux, impermanent. Things were here today and gone tomorrow. He didn't see any abiding reality in this, but then neither did Aristotle. For him, the only eternal thing in man was his other soul, that in man that could eternally contemplate the One. Both philosophers, however, agreed that all knowledge begins with the senses, and that the intellect gets its knowledge of created things via the senses. But while material substances were perceived by the senses, immaterial substances could only be known when the intellect was added. So while the senses can affirm something exists, only the intellect knows what it is that exists. As said, for Plato, to base any intellectual knowledge of ultimate truth on any sensory data nets man nothing more than speculation and opinion. For him, pure ignorance. To this, however, we would add that no true knowledge of God enters through either the senses or the intellect, for neither one is the route of God's transcendent revelation to man. So let us not pretend we can justify any notion of God or truth based on man's sensible or intellectual modes of knowing. That in man capable of encountering the truth and reality of God is no known faculty, but something that probably doesn't even belong to man, but rather to God in man. Thus, what we call the eye of the Spirit is, at bottom, God's own seeing and knowing. That Paul defined human nature as body, soul, spirit might account for this mysterious spiritual faculty, for in themselves body and soul seem to lack this capacity. So Aristotle rightly postulated that whatever this faculty is, it must be another kind of soul, a contemplative faculty. He calls it, marginalia, faith, a gift. As for person, Aristotle never went beyond genus and species to ponder who some individual human being might be. As much as he said was, to speak of the soul of Socrates or Corsicus or Jesus, let's say, simply means this particular soul in this particular body. The individual is analogous to the universal in its composition. Since being individual is a universal, then reference to Socrates or Corsicus is solely a reference to a particular individual, a person, according to the Christian understanding of person. Aristotle's understanding of a subject was primarily grammatical. A subject could be anything about which something could be predicated, said about, or attributed to. Thus, the fact Socrates, Corsicus, and Jesus are all particular individuals do not really differ. It is when predicating something about them that they are referred to as who, pointing to whatever differentiates them. It is pointing out differences that defines who one is, a person, in other words. As for these differences, Aristotle put these down to different physical properties, attributes, accidents, characteristics, etc. The difference was not the fact that each was an individual human being, but that each candle, body, had different accidental properties, characteristics, etc. Also worthy of note, his understanding was that, quote, primary substance, sensible matter, was the seat of the subject, as well as all its individual properties.